Hello, everyone. My name is Aaron Christensen. Welcome to Horror 101 with Dr. AC, and this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. We are heading into the back half of October, and there's still time to donate. Please find the link to the fundraiser below in the description for this video. And tonight we will be talking about We Have Always Lived in the Castle from 2018, an adaptation of the Shirley Jackson novel. And to chat with me about that movie is my awesome panel consisting of Christianne Benedict and Grant Kuchan. Welcome back, everybody. Thanks so much. We're going to be talking about We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Stacie. How do we say her last name? Is it Passon or Passon? No idea. It's Passon.
I mean, in my mind, I want to pronounce it passion, but I know that's wrong.
That works too. Well, she certainly had a passion for this one, as did Mark Kruger, who did the adaptation. Apparently, he did this. He did treatment for this way back in like 2005. It was a long time in the making. And Michael Douglas, the actor, decided to take a shine to it and lent his name and ended up being a kind of an executive producer for it. But I really like this movie. Christianne, you were saying backstage, is it a horror film? And I guess that's something we can discuss tonight. Christianne also has written a wonderful review of the film over on her blog, Krell Laboratories. I'll include a link to that in the comments below. But Christianne, go ahead and kick us off. Tell us, because you just saw this movie for the first time early October, right?
Yeah, early October. Actually, end of September, because I knew I was going to be doing this, but I also wanted to write about it. And not only that, but I knew the film had come out and I'd forgotten about it. And the book is one of my favorite books. So I mean, Shirley Jackson is a literary idol of mine. Curiously enough, somebody that I would not want to meet, because all of her books have sort of this weird paranoid neurosis to them. Which is apparently consistent with her personal life. And that's very much on display in the book and in this movie for that matter. But we were asking, is this a horror movie? And I am not sure.
Yeah.
It has, and when I actually rewatched it again earlier today. And I had just finished watching the adaptation of The Fall of the House of Usher on Netflix. And it dawned on me that this story is a variant of The Fall of the House of Usher. So yeah, it's got the bona fides. I mean, it's written by a very well-known writer who's associated with the genre. I mean, it has the narrative tropes of Gothic horror, but I don't know. It does. It's sort of in a liminal space between the Gothic and the horror movie.
Yeah, and I mean, you and I have talked over the years about what gets to be included in the horror genre and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I tend to be more inclusive than not. So I'm happy to kind of bring it into the fold. But I agree, it's not what we would consider a traditional horror film, although it does bear a lot of resemblance to the kind of Gothic horror classics we saw in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s.
Yeah, there's a series on the Criterion channel right now called Gaslight Noir, and this sort of is like those movies. Yeah. It's movies like Hangover Square or The Spiral Staircase, which is an slasher movie. Yeah. I mean, this would fit very much with those if it was in black and white and starring, I don't know, Joan Fontaine as Mary Cat or something.
Grant, you and I talked earlier today. So you have an existing relationship with the novel back when you were younger.
Yes.
I've not read the novel myself. So all the story elements that unfolded in the film were fresh to me. How was it for you as someone who was familiar with the story?
If somebody who's familiar with the story, I mean, as far as the novel goes, it's one of those that's sort of held up as a great example of an unreliable narrator, and it's got those fantastic sort of New England sort of Gothic sort of claustrophobic sort of feel to it. A couple of things that I feel like came across in the novel a little bit better than in the film, and this is not necessarily a criticism of the film because I enjoyed the film quite a bit, and I mean, I'm tossing out some spoilers here. I'm not sure if that's going to be.
Look at that.
All
We have a
right,
handy
we got a
banner
graphic.
just for that.
Awesome. You know, when Mary Cat ends up poisoning everybody, and the father and the mother character to go ahead and be with the elder sister. In the novel, it's also poisoning of the little brother as well. You know what I mean? And I feel like trying to get at mom and dad because they're being mean to big sister is one thing, but getting back at everybody so that I can be alone with big sister sort of feeds a little bit more into that almost psychotic mindset, which is where we sort of go down that path a little bit more towards the horror.
Sure.
That sort of coupled with and this is a little bit probably a little more timely right now than we necessarily need it to be. The amount of anti-Semitism that she and her husband would experience living in New England and both being Jewish at the time was sort of reflective of the way that the community responds to Mary Cat and the rest of the family.
Yeah. And
in the book, it's a lot more palpable as far as, okay, we're this is an allegory here. You know what I mean? Whereas in the film, it's sort of like, okay, they were just sort of shunning them because they thought they were weird freaks, which, granted, they kind of were, as opposed to, yeah.
So there's a class element to that too, because I mean, you're talking about the lord of the manor and you know the rest of the peasants out in the town looking down on them as degenerates. But yeah.
Well, let's back up really quick, and kind of the basic concept is that we do have our two main characters. They are the Blackwoods, and we have our main character who is our narrator, which is Mary Catherine Blackwood, and her sister Constance. Mary Cat is played by Taissa Farmiga, and Alexandra Daddario plays Constance. And we also get a lovely turn from Crispin Glover as Uncle Julian. And Sebastian Stan plays cousin Charles, who's the one who kind of, it seems like Mary Cat and Constance and Uncle Julian have kind of found a rhythm working together in the house. Uncle Julian is writing his memoirs, and then a cousin Charles comes to visit and basically throws that whole chemistry off. And it's pretty clear from the outset he's there to see if he can get something, i.e. the Blackwood family fortune, worm his way in somehow. And he starts, romancing Constance in pursuit of that.
Reminder that he is their cousin.
Exactly. It was a different time.
But I mean, the Mary Cat's reaction to that is not, my wonderful little idyllic world with my sister and my uncle is being disrupted. Right. She behaves a little bit like a jilted lover.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, this film is, this film and the book a little bit, but this film in particular is just laced through with incest.
I think all of the performances are fantastic. I really love Taissa Farmiga's incarnation of Mary Cat. She is just all bright eyes and just kind of like always on edge. And I love her tactics of just defiance. And I clearly I haven't seen enough Marvel movies, because I was like, who is that incredibly handsome man playing cousin Charles? And it's Sebastian Stan from the movie, the Captain America movies, as the Winter Soldier.
Well, and the one that really surprised me, and I shouldn't have assumed anything. The woman that was playing Constance, I mean, I remember her being in, what was it, the remake of Baywatch. And I don't know why that was on, but just sort of that moment of like, oh, it's her. And I really was not expecting a whole hell of a lot from her. But the way that, the living in denial, and if she just smiles enough, the fact that everything will be okay, and that as long as we don't bring it up, that everybody's dead, everything will be fine. That sort of like 60s suburban waspy sort of like, we'll make it through as long as we just bake enough.
And every time she smiles, there's this light of madness in her eyes.
and just like a little bit of sadness there, like because there'll be these little moments where she'll just break just slightly from that smile, and you can see it there, and it just sort of lets it creep in just enough as everything goes along there. Yeah,
the tone. Stacie Passon, her direction, I think, is it's such a beautiful movie. Like, it really is a gorgeous production design. But the thing that kind of sung out to me, literally, was our score by Andrew Hewitt, because it's all these kind of like light plucking of strings that keeps the energy up, but also makes you very anxious watching it. There's a sense of something not good is going on all the time here.
It adds to sort of the creepy sort of spine, literally spine tingling sort of moments of like, I'm just not comfortable with this at all. Yeah.
It's the sort of score that the Koreans like to use, and it reminds me a little bit of the score of Parasite.
Okay.
And it also reminds me a little bit of, actually it reminds me a lot of the score of Stoker, but then a lot of this movie reminds me of Stoker.
Yes, in your review for it, you talked about Matthew Good, who is the star of Stoker, and yes,
well, he plays Uncle Charlie. Well, he plays Uncle Charlie in that. I mean, it's the same. He would have been. It's essentially the same character.
Mary Cat also dabbles in what we could call natural magic, where she uses a lot of spells for protection and to keep things away. Because she will take things and bury them in jars out on the property. She takes a lot of things and just buries them throughout. But there's a point at which she comes back and all of her totems have been dug up and they're on display. And I was do we think, I don't think this is much of a spoiler, but do we think that was her that did that, or is she just, what do we think of those moments where her magic is not working?
Oh, that she dug it up herself and put it out there?
I mean, they're dug up, so it's kind of like, who did that? Because we don't know of anybody else who's on the property.
Yeah, unless Cuz was to go ahead and follow her out there and then decide he was going to dig everything up after. But yeah, I could see that happening. Yeah.
Actually, I honestly think it's Charles.
I think it's probably Charles too, but I could see it happening.
But I think it was before, wasn't it before he came? Because it's while she goes into she usually goes into town on a Tuesday. Yeah. And I do love, oh my gosh, I love the ticking clock of last Tuesday, last Wednesday, last weekend, leading up to Tuesday, yesterday. I'm like, oh, this is great, because something big is coming, and it's terrifying.
One of the things that I love about that countdown is that all of the title cards that have that on them have death cap mushrooms in the background. Yes. And they don't make as much of death cap mushrooms in the movie, but that's one of the things that Mary Cat lists in the first paragraph of the book as things that she loves. So, I mean, yeah, it's a nice translation of something that's in the book without actually making a plot point of it.
But she usually goes into town on Tuesday to do shopping. And on that day, she goes into town on a Thursday. So she doesn't have time to, make all of her preparation or spells. But when she comes back, if I remember correctly, when she comes back, she runs out and she sees that her totems have been dug up. And I don't see Charles, because Charles has just arrived. So I don't see Charles out in the backyard, like digging things up.
I think Charles has been casing the place.
Ah, okay. That's fun. So when we see Charles for the first time, it's not the first time Charles has been on the property.
I don't believe so, no.
Of course, it is all coming from an unreliable narrator anyway.
It is. So. It is.
We can count on anything.
Yeah, and Mary Cat's little buried spells kind of muddies the debate of whether or not this is a horror movie, because that very much ties it to a folk horror tradition. And when Mary Cat and Constance eventually, have to flee the fire, they go to the forest, and that's where they hide, like they're wood sprites or something. And it's very much in that tradition of horror going to Earth.
I'm surprised that this film doesn't get talked about more often, considering, I mean, I'm guessing that it got greenlit because of the success of Haunting of Hill House on Netflix. But it doesn't feel like this film gets that same kind of love. Like it's one that I've kind of just heard in the background for a while, but it's not one that people are like, oh my gosh, you got to check this movie out. And I'm kind of surprised that because I genuinely enjoy this one.
I think maybe it's the genre ambiguity. How do you sell this movie? And where do you release it? I mean, I know it eventually wound up on Shudder and then everywhere, but I mean, are you going to sell this to a horror audience? You can, but and they make a change to the plot near the end, I think, to definitely sell it to a horror audience.
Yeah.
But
it's not a ghost story. It's not
it's fish nor foul.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a hard sell.
And you don't have and again, I feel all the performances are fantastic, but you didn't cast it as if you were trying to sell it as a gothic horror. You know what I mean? You don't have the sort of higher brow actors in it where we could release it as a prestige piece either. We've got some younger actors who nobody's really expecting that much from. And again, they all give fantastic performances.
Yeah.
But
there's not a lot of marquee value there.
Exactly. I mean, and nothing against Crispin Glover, but he's not exactly a huge.
There is an audience for Crispin Glover.
Oh, for sure there is.
Yeah, but just not necessarily the higher brow.
No, not at all.
Christianne, you were talking backstage about kind of the relationship of the novels like Jim Thompson. Can you speak more to that?
Oh, right. Yeah, I mean, this is a first-person narrative by a psychopath. It's a lot more genteel, in part because it was written by Shirley Jackson rather than Jim Thompson or Robert Bloch, and those guys used bludgeons, and Shirley Jackson used scalpels.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very much in the same sort of ticking time bomb of a psychopath going through their day. It reminds me most of Robert Bloch's The Scarf, which starts with that line, fetish, I don't know, but I had to have it with me. And that's very much the same sort of neurosis that I see in this film, particularly in the novel, but also they do communicate that a little bit in the movie. When there's a wonderful sequence right at the start when she sits down to write her narrative, and she stops in the middle of the paragraph that you find in the book, and the camera keeps going, and it finds the things that are omitted from the voiceover that are in that first paragraph. Like there's a phonograph playing a speech from Richard III, and then it alights on a dish of mushrooms, and that's very much a way of translating that sort of first person lunacy.
One of the things that kind of struck me is when cousin Charles shows up, that there's that helplessness of being a child, that you're not able to do the things you want to do. You're not able to set the world right. You're not able to dictate policy. All you can do is kind of act out or, poison your whole family.
Yeah.
But
either or.
But that was one of the things that really we just watched a movie called The Innocents not long ago, not the 1961 classic, but a more recent film from Norway. But that also kind of touches on that inability to affect the world around you because you're just a kid and you're dependent on the adults in your life. And in this case, Charles is in and he starts to take charge of the family, much to Mary Kat's dismay.
And the how she responds to it by trying to initially with her white magic, and then through acting out, and then eventually setting fire to his shit. It's like, all right, if you're not going to leave,
I'm gonna burn you out.
Exactly. And she asks him, if memory serves, she asks him nicely,
yes,
to leave multiple times,
as nicely as Mary Kat can do anything, really.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he just doesn't take the hint.
No,
I mean, I question the wisdom of a fortune hunter going to a house where it is suspected that one or the other of the sisters has murdered the entire clan. How did he think it was going to end?
Well, and the fact that he's also there to romance the one who is the most likely suspect, at least the one who is brought to trial for it.
I mean, that doesn't seem like a good plan. I mean, Charles is greedy and he's handsome. And let me tell you, listening to Sebastian Stan speak Italian is something that I did not know that I needed.
Yeah, I think he's a wonderful villain. He is equal parts charm and oily.
But he's not very bright.
But no. You know, but the handsome, oily ones never are.
That's true.
Christianne, you sent me something earlier today via email that I wanted to share with everybody. So I've got this is the paperback release of Shirley Jackson's.
Yeah, that's the first edition from 1963.
1963. Okay.
Yeah.
And then if we flash forward to 1977, I think it is
77. Yeah.
And we see Mario Bava's last film, Shock. They're kind of the same image.
It is an extra level of Italian ripoff, and I am absolutely here for that.
And that was I thought that was a fun little thing, and thank you for sending
it. Also suggests a world in which Mario Bava made a version of We Have Always Lived in the Castle, and I really want to live in that world.
Say now I'm like, I have to go back and check out Shock and see if there are threads of Shirley Jackson.
There's not.
Okay.
There's not. There's absolutely not. And it's not a very good movie. I wish that Bava had gone out with a better movie.
Sure. All right. Any final thoughts on We Have Always Lived in the Castle? What poetry to that title. I love it.
Yeah, it's lovely, but that's Shirley Jackson all over, though. Mm-hmm. I mean, you know, the first sentence of The Haunting of Hill House is widely quoted as one of the most perfect paragraphs ever written in English.
Yeah.
So, and you know, I don't know. Maybe it is, but yeah, I mean, this film is very much in Jackson's private universe. I mean, you know, there is that feeling of everybody in the world is out to get you. I mean, the locals are gonna, you know, throw rocks at you or burn you out of the cabin that you just stayed at a week too long after the season closes or something like that.
I would say that it's a surprisingly good film that really never got any traction.
And surprisingly faithful too. I mean, apart from the one change they make to the end,
which I didn't dislike, by the way. I thought it was a very satisfying ending. It may not be led to the letter of Jackson, but I feel like it for an audience, it's like, yes, thank you. I wanted to see that.
Yeah,
the one thing that the film doesn't convey is the way that the Blackwood sisters become sort of mythological figures in that town. They become sort of the ladies of the castle. But I do like the end where Mary Cat says, I'd like to cook a child. Can I eat a child? And Constance says, I don't know how to cook one. Which is a great last line.
Mm-hmm. And I would also say that, honestly, this would be a really great film for somebody who says they don't like horror movies.
Yeah. It's kind of it's a spooky, atmospheric, suspenseful, but not ghostly, not gory, and really well produced.
Elegant.
Cool. Elegant is a fine word. And on that fine word, this is Scare-A-Thon 2023, and it is benefiting the Women's Reproductive Rights Assistance Project. The link to donate is below in the description of this video. Please make a contribution. This is a cause that's very important to myself and my guests. Thank you both so much for coming on and chatting about this one. And until next time, keep searching, keep exploring, and keep sharing the scare.